Right, so welcome everybody. Here is another video on behalf of Hazelmere Community Rugby Football Club, sponsored by Mindset. And today we have Matt, who is with us. I would introduce Matt, but Matt's got so many fingers in many pies around mental health and well-being. So I'm going to let him do that and then talk about his role with the Samaritans a bit, and then we'll just see where the conversation goes. So over to you, Matt.
Brilliant stuff. Thanks very much, Matt. Two Matts on this call. Fabulous. So yeah, brilliant. So thank you for inviting me to come along to this talk today, to give you sort of a bit of an insight into the world that I work in. And I work in mental health. You're going to see this behind me as we're talking, or as I'm talking. We need to talk more about this subject. Definitely, I'm passionate about it. Just brief sort of introduction to me, why I do what I do, how I got into the roles that I have now. I was in a corporate world for 20 years, traveled all over the world. Great things were going on, of course, although I didn't recognize mentally the impact of what was happening. Left it sort of unchecked, carried on living my life the way I was, in the fast lane pretty much. And on the 16th of January 2016, everything went crashing down when I lost my job suddenly. Created post-traumatic stress. So I had my first sort of experience of mental ill health personally, which was created by an incident that was out of my control, or I felt was out of my control when I was out of control. And that was something that sort of I didn't really expect to happen, of course. And then things changed. I started my own business. When people were supporting me and around me, they helped me through my crisis, which was fantastic. I started working in the world of mental health. I helped to launch a magazine into the UK in 2017 called Happyful. It's a free subscription magazine, happyful.com. It's fabulous. Talks about positive mental health. There's lots of stories from men as well as women, of course. But I'm now very passionate about supporting this conversation around mental health in its totality. As part of my other role, and the reason why this sort of is important for me, is I'm also a Samaritan. And I've been a Samaritan now for 5.5 years. I joined Samaritans back in 2015, about a year before my crisis, actually. And I think what's really important is that I joined Samaritans at a point now where I can reflect back and say, I joined because I thought about helping others before helping myself. And I think that's a really important part of my sort of world, which is that reality of we need to learn to look after ourselves better, take note and really listen into what's going on in our brains, because when we do and when we tune in, we can actually change our own direction for the better. Really, really important, especially when we don't want to talk about our challenges. In 2015, I wasn't talking to anybody about the things that I was experiencing. Yeah, I was experiencing a lot of problems. So it would have been a great moment for me to sort of take some help and support at that point. So that's really important for me. As a Samaritan, you know, I've had a wonderful experience for the last 5.5 years, and I continue to have the role of Samaritan. And I love every time I go in to take calls from anybody that wants to talk to Samaritans. We have a lot of callers within Samaritans, as I'm sure you probably all appreciate, because there's a lot of challenges out there. The thing about speaking and speaking out is often people don't want to because they're fearful. And they're worried about, if I tell my friends, if I tell my family, or if I speak to others within my community, they're going to judge me and they're going to make me feel that I'm a real problem to them, and they're going to push me away. And the reality is it's the opposite of that. Often when people talk out and explain what's going on or try to put words around those feelings, it can be quite sort of cathartic and relieving, right? So that's something that I'm really passionate about supporting. Through the work we do with Samaritans, it's really clear that we're there just to listen, right? We're not there to tell people what to do. We're not there to give you advice on what to do next. What we're there to do is to think about options, opportunities, changes, and maybe challenge some of your thinking as well, you know? So it's a really important and critical role in society, especially today. It's getting harder. Things aren't getting easier for anybody with the current crisis that we're in, and we don't know how long that crisis is going to be around, but we're pretty sure it's going to be around for some time yet. It's important that you have somewhere where you can talk. That's what Samaritans offers, and that's what we do, you know.
So do you find that there's a reluctance to reach out then? Is that, are people afraid even to pick up the phone to strangers like the Samaritans and just sort of say, something is wrong, I don't know what it is, but something isn't right?
Yeah, there is. I'll tell you sort of some insights from calls, you know, and not divulge anybody in particular, but just in terms of sort of general themes that happen in some calls is, you know, people will often say, oh, thank you so much for listening. I've got nobody to talk to. And what I find really interesting about that, of course, is, you know, people will have others to talk to, friends, family, communities, but they don't feel comfortable. And then you ask them, well, why can't you talk to your family or your friends? oh, they've got their own problems, they don't want to hear my problems, you know. So it's that, back to that thought of, if we don't share our problems, we don't know what's going on, and we just assume, you know, I can smile a lot, but I've still got some issues, and
Yeah.
you think I'm happy, and that's what we've got to contend with. So people do call because they feel that there's an opportunity to talk to somebody. It's interesting because a lot of callers are new callers as well. We do get a lot of new callers, so that's fab, you know, because that's what we want, is more people picking up and using the service. And you don't have to be, and this is a reality, you don't have to be on your knees at crisis to use Samaritans.
Yeah.
A lot of people consider it as a suicide prevention service, which of course ultimately we are. We're stopping people from taking those steps towards the thought of suicide. But the reality is we're there to support people who are feeling worried or vulnerable or concerned or have an issue that they just need to talk about.
Yeah, I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? Suicide is, it's World Suicide Prevention Day that we're recording this on.
Yeah.
Suicide prevention doesn't start with somebody on the precipice. It starts all the way at the top with talking, support, and help to stop people getting down to that side. So you, if you are just feeling a bit low or don't understand or can't express an appropriate emotional reaction, I suppose is a term.
Yeah.
For a situation that you're thinking, it's okay to call. It's fine to give you guys a call and you'll have a chat with whoever's on the other end of the line. It's not waiting for crisis.
No, absolutely, and that's what we're trying to avoid. You know, we know as a country, and the reality is, you know, we're good at responding to crisis, and that's something that's really important to think about. We're good at responding to crisis. What we're not doing well is averting the crisis. You know, preventing it. Why is it? You know, we've got first aiders in the workplace who help when somebody cuts themselves, injures themselves, or has a heart attack. And mental health first aiders aren't even mandatory yet to be in workplaces or in community clubs or whatever it is, in whatever setting. It's a really important message because, you know, everything that we do, believe it or not, has an impact on us mentally, you know. So every action we take, every move we make, and every decision we make will have an impact on us mentally. Yet lots of people won't see that. What I also want to sort of put into this discussion is this thought that says, why is it we only see mental health as being negative? You know, because actually there's a massive positive to mental health. When you feel happy, when you feel excited, when you're looking forward to stuff, that's all positive things.
Yeah.
That's what we should have.
Yeah.
But when you're feeling mental health issues coming on, like depression or anxiety, all those things get sucked away. And then we think of it negatively. Then we think of it as being dark. Then we think of it as being really risky and dangerous. So it's a big piece to it.
I guess it goes back to that sort of the whole thing with all health. It is a whole thing, isn't it? There is a spectrum of health, whether it be physical or mental. You know, there are people who are in good health and their bodies feel great, and there are people who are in poor health and their bodies are suffering and struggling. It's the same with mental health. You know, it is a spectrum, and and you are expected to go up and down it.
Yeah,
it's whether or not you seek the appropriate help before it's too late, when it starts sliding down, that's the issue. And I think that's something that particularly men are not very good at.
yeah.
It took me I know it took me ages to reach out, but I now know my own warning signs and my own symptoms, so I know when to go, something's not right, or I am not able to manage this myself, so I need to move on. But coming to the Samaritans, that's one way of doing it without, I suppose, revealing to anybody. If you're not ready to come out and talk about it in a social sense.
Absolutely, yeah. You know, and actually that's a really valid and important comment and point, really, is you're talking to a stranger. You know, you're not phoning your mate Dave down the pub. You know, you're talking to a complete stranger. And, you know, a lot of Samaritans have a different name to their real name, just for that sort of anonymity between who we are as a Samaritan and who we are as, you know, as a person within society and the public, general public. So, you know, it's important to recognize that whoever you talk to, they're not going to go off and share that with other people. You know, I talk about the stories of things or comments people have made. I never would tell you who the person was, and actually I don't even know who that person is. So I could tell you all the details of a story, but I couldn't tell you who it was. And that's really important. You get that anonymity. There is a one thing that's really important to recognize with Samaritans, and within any setting when we talk about mental health in particular, is this thing about confidentiality. You know, to a point, confidentiality is in place, and I have to be really careful with that. The only difference being safeguarding. If you have safeguarding, and I'm sure within the club you have safeguarding rules and operations people, is if somebody is seen as being vulnerable, then we have a duty of responsibility to help them. So if that means that there's a vulnerable young person, or if it's somebody with learning difficulties, we would have a duty of responsibility, moral responsibility, to make sure we offer support in a different way, slightly different support. But that's something that's really important. So with Samaritans, we do offer that. That doesn't mean if you call and you express some worries about exams or the workplace or a relationship that you might be going through, we would engage safeguarding in that necessarily, unless we felt there was some risks or vulnerabilities. And I think that's really important. So it's confidential. You don't know who's on the call. We don't see telephone numbers. We don't see names come up on screens. We take very minimal notes on just a pad to just prompt ourselves, and then we destroy every note at the end of every shift. And that's all it is. It's just, we're there. We don't take the callers home with us. We don't come back to a caller the next day. We're just very much there for that moment, just to support the person.
And you touched on an important point there about the types of issues that people are phoning you about, and the types of issues, therefore, that can affect people's mental health and and take it into poor mental health. So, is there any sort of, do you find that there's a common ground, or is it just very, very sporadic? Is COVID, for example, at the moment, creating lots of problems where people are worried about their health, or is those sorts of things?
I think, I would say probably 80% of callers to Samaritans are people experiencing mental health issues. Then we do have callers who just want to have a chat. We have callers who want to do other things on the calls. We have a full variety of different people calling, and male and female, by the way. It's not just more women than men. It's, we get lots of callers from across all of society, different cultures, different backgrounds, religions, so on. So it's really important to sort of recognize that everybody's welcome, everybody calls. We don't discriminate about anything. We don't talk about any of our own preferences. It's not there for us to share our opinions. And I think that's an important one with this non-judgmental listening, which means I'm not going to tell you you're doing the wrong thing. I'm not going to say you've done something bad. I'm just going to listen to how you feel about those experiences and give you that safety to sort of talk through. But COVID has definitely increased the volume of calls with anxiety, I would say, thinking about sort of the impact of COVID on individuals, where, people are fearful about the future. They're worried about health. They're worried about finances. They're worried about so many things that actually are always present, but now have been put under a bigger light because of COVID. And so things have changed, and we do get a lot of people talking about it. But then also there's seasonal changes within Samaritans. So as we come towards winter and Christmas, you get a lot of people who miss loved ones, or are fearful of going through holiday seasons and things like that. So it does, the conversation will change. The day of the week will change the conversation as well, bizarrely. So like middle of the week tends to be one of the busiest times. I guess people are looking at their employment or where they are in their schooling or college or whatever it is, and have a different way of seeing things. So we do see some changes, but the conversation is always the person's conversation. Whatever you're worried about, as whatever it is that concerns you, it doesn't have to be about COVID. We're there for you. It's your call. It's not our call. It's your call. You talk what you want to talk about.
Cool. You spoke about the ability to listen and not try and fix things, and that's a really important thing to you. And I think that's a societal change that needs to happen, because we are very keen. We are very keen as human beings. If somebody comes to us with a problem, to fix it, to try and make it better. So, have you got any tips throughout your years of working with the Samaritans on how to actively listen, how to create that environment that is, if somebody approaches you, you can listen, but not push your opinions over to people?
Well, like I said previously, if somebody's expressing that they've done something or they're worried about something, it's not for me to give my opinion to it. And I think the thing is, we're very quick to share our opinions. We're very good at giving advice, right? That's a reality. As human beings, we're very good at giving advice, often founded on no qualification whatsoever. We've got great suggestions and tips and answers to every question, right? I'm really good at doing that. In a Samaritan setting, or in a setting where you're trying to support somebody who's showing vulnerability, it's important just to park that. You have to learn to park that. And actually the best way to do it is by just holding your lips and saying nothing. Saying nothing is more powerful than saying something that's going to hurt them, right? And I mean that engage the conversation, but just be quiet and listen. I've had the best conversations with people in Samaritans where I've said hardly anything for an hour, and they've talked about their worries, their concerns, they've processed all these thoughts and the things that are going on in their head. They've unraveled, I call it unraveling the spaghetti of, you know, the brain gets really foggy and you want to sort of create some straight line thinking, some rational thoughts. And at the end, they're very grateful because you've given them a space to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important one. Non-judgmental listening comes from stopping talking and opening these. The biggest issue we have, and this is the reality of why people don't practice non-judgmental listening, is because we get so caught up in this thought that we haven't got time to listen.
Yeah.
I'm too busy. I haven't got time to listen to you. I don't have, you know, I've got these things over here that are more important than talking and listening. And that's what I encourage more of. As a good captain or a leader or somebody that wants to support the humans, it's useful to give them a bit of time to do that.
Yeah.
Just by saying, I've got 5 minutes, can we do it now? Isn't really going to be helpful if they need 10. Because then you've got to find another 5 minutes for all those important things, you know.
Yeah.
That's what I would suggest. So think, you know, learn to keep that shut, let people talk, but give them enough time to share what they need to share in a way that they need to do it. It's really important.
So in your other side of the work that you do with like Happy Full and all that sort of stuff, which I subscribe to, by the way, so it's very good. It's a good read. What other sort of hints and tips do you have for people who feel that they need to open up but don't know how? I suppose is.
Yeah, you know what? I come across a really useful one recently, or in the last 12 months. So we've had some other challenges personally within our home environment with one of our children, and one thing that I did. So I'm a parent of a child that has mental ill health as well. You know, as a human, that's one of my roles. You know, as a parent, is I set up, and somebody put me onto it as an idea and as a concept. I set up an anonymous Twitter account. So not to share anything gory or to be sort of horrendous, but just to put my thoughts out there into a social space without telling everybody, hi, I'm Matt, this is my issue, these are my challenges. And what actually happened, which I found fascinating, was it helped to build a community. It helped me to become part of a community of people who were going through some very similar experiences. Now, everybody's in a different place, of course. The experience isn't always the same. But what you do have is people who have been through the experience recently. You have people that are going through the experience now, and you have people that are starting in the experience. So you have this sort of natural churn throughout that, which says there's always somebody who has an answer to a question. One thing that I find really good about that environment that I did, and this just was a suggestion, is I could put a question out there, and actually one of the things I was worried about as a reality was a hospital that my daughter was being transitioned to. We put out there, does anybody know anything about this facility? And what actually happened was one of the commissioners who had assessed the property contacted me on the Twitter account through messaging to give me confidence that the place that my daughter was being moved to was actually very good.
That's brilliant.
And you know what? I would never have thought to have done that.
Yeah.
I would never have thought. So actually what we can see there is you can use social media for good.
Yeah.
And by creating something, it doesn't, you know, you wouldn't be able to find me on there. You wouldn't be able to search Matt Holman and find this account. And I'm never going to expose what that account is. But the reality is it's a safe space for me to do that. And even as a Samaritan, as a mental health first aider, as an instructor of mental health, you know, I've got people to talk to, but I didn't want to talk to those people. I wanted to have my anonymity.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's really important. There are ways and means to do that. And Happy Full has, and just back to the Happy Full conversation, that was something I wanted to share as a personal sort of experience as to how to do something. And as a parent, if anybody is a parent that's watching this, it's always a useful resource to look at that as well. Look at Twitter. You know, as much as people know how to use Twitter, I guess. But as Happy Full, they share lots of tips and advice and suggestions. There's lots of great articles on their website around different sort of people's perspectives or viewpoints of different types of challenges. And it talks to people, you know, the articles are really there to give people sight of things that could be done to support them. I think it's great. So I'm a big advocate, of course, I was part of it, but.
I think, so I suppose it's sort of key, I suppose I'm trying to get two key messages across, and that is, if you're approached by someone, try and make time to listen, but it is listening. It's not fixing. It's not solving. There are professionals who will do that.
Yep.
And if you make that time, and you have the courage to actually find someone to talk to, I think you can unravel a lot of the problems yourself. You can see where it's coming from. You can kind of try and work out a set of solutions yourself. I know I do that when I have issues. By talking to someone, I kind of realize what the actual issue is by filtering out everything else on top of it. So I try and work out what the actual issue is. And I think that's key, is to give people that space. So if someone does approach you, is find the time to listen. Now might not be appropriate, but at some point do.
But even offering even offering to listen can be really powerful. The person may not want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Offering that person could be the first time anybody's ever actually offered to listen to what they want to talk about.
Yeah.
It can be so powerful. I think that's such an important part of all of that. Don't feel like, oh, I've failed because they haven't talked to me. Just offer it. And as you offer, their mind will be thinking, oh, maybe somebody is interested to hear me. Maybe that person does want to help me. And I think that's so powerful.
Yeah. And then obviously it takes a lot of courage to open up and speak out, but the facilities are there. People like the Samaritans, if you don't think you have a close enough group of friends you can open up to yet, if you do, brilliant. Talk to. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised as to how many people will actually sit down now and go and have that conversation with you. There's a lot of stigma still around, but I think a lot of stigma is going around. It is disappearing, and I think that's a great piece of work. We're coming very much to the end, Matt. So, is there anything else you wanted to add? Anything you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I think just touching on your very last point there about stigma and the way that society sees things like mental ill health. And, if you think about words like depression, anxiety, the Mental Health Act, psychosis and all these things, people always have really negative thoughts around. Society's view of it is bad. And actually it's not. This is an illness. These are illnesses, or these are parts of illnesses. Suicide as well, add it to the list. These are parts of illnesses. Illnesses are not chosen by anybody. Nobody goes out to shop for an illness. We all are susceptible to all of this. None of us are invincible, yet we sometimes feel like we are. COVID's a great example. There's a part of society that thinks they're invincible, they're never going to get it. And actually, it's not about them getting it, it's about them giving it to others. That's the most important part of that. It's the same with mental illness. People avoid people with depression because they feel like they might get the depression. Yeah, you might get some associated low mood out of it, but the reality is it's an illness, and it's a mental illness that sits in the brain. We need to be really conscious of that in society. Stigma exists today for the simple reason of people don't understand things. People have no idea what depression feels like for the person that's suffering. So they make an assumption that it's lazy people who can't be bothered to get up, people who don't want to go to work, people who would rather stay in bed. That's not true. Because people want nothing more than to do all of those things, but their energy is so low, it's impossible. So think about that. And I think that's one thing that I'm so passionate about making sure people understand. Stigma exists by people making their own realities of what they think things are. Learn about the things, learn about what things like depression are, how anxiety changes, how we all every day have this sort of constant sort of heartbeat of our mental well-being. We wake up happy, we go out the front door, and there's a delay on the road or whatever, and it makes us feel a little bit less. Think about how that will impact. Every choice, decision, and action we take has an impact on us mentally, either positively or negatively. If we add up too many negatives, it's going to create some challenges. So we have to always balance that. Continue doing the good stuff, do less of the bad stuff. Make sure you do recovery and not just continue until you break. And that's what we got to do. I think for me, that's the most important thing. But we only break stigma when we educate people. Give people the right knowledge.
I think 2020 is a great year for producing that in many realms, and I'm not going to go into the others at the moment.
No,
but education is really, really important on all of these things to understand other people's points of view. And like you touched on it beautifully, I think there, when I have a low period, and it's not that I don't want to go to work. It's not that I don't want to be at my desk. I want more than anything to be there. However, I just physically can't. I'm a 15 stone rugby player who used to be a doorman and used to run pubs. And there are times that I don't have the energy or even the courage to walk up to the shop.
Yeah.
And it's not a laziness. It's not a something. I physically can't do it.
No.
And thankfully I've learned how to manage myself now, and I have a support network that around me that will help me deal with that. But there's nothing to be ashamed of about that. It's not. There's nothing you can sit there and say, oh, this is wrong. I shouldn't be doing this. It's fine. It's fine to feel bad. It's how you recover. It's what you do to help yourself recover that's the important thing. And when you start seeing these signs repeatedly happening, what you start to do about it, in my opinion. And that's how you get better, once you spot your signs and your symptoms and you know how to manage them. Everybody experiences low mood, everybody experiences sadness, everybody experiences loss, and everybody has negative emotions. It's how you manage those that as they move forward and deal with them, and that stops them becoming a problem in the more common mental health areas of depression and anxiety and those sorts of areas. Obviously there are a lot of other things that affect that, but have you got any thoughts on that side of things?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me around all of this is never to give up hope on anything. We can't stop things from happening. Incidents, accidents, events, crisis, traumas, pandemics. We can't stop those personally. We have to manage the way it impacts upon us. The energy element is a really difficult one. It's maybe you do need to have something. From a medical perspective, maybe you do need some alternative supports in there. But never think that the only support is one. That's the reality with all of this. We have to maintain hope through all of this, crisis, through our lives. When we lose hope, we lose the will. When we lose the will, we know what happens. And, genuinely, I hope that everybody gets the right support and help. Hopefully the systems will come back and work properly and we'll be able to evolve where we're going. But personally, we can take that responsibility too. And I mean that in a, not just don't talk about it. I mean that in a talk about it. Be mindful that actually it's more brave to be, honest and authentic and genuine than it is to hide it. And be really conscious of that. Don't feel ashamed about mental ill health. There's a great video with the World Health Organization about a black dog and depression. And it says in there, the only shame of mental ill health is missing out on life. Or having a mental illness is missing out on life. And I think that's so important. If you're struggling, if you're worried about things, if things are taking they're really a burden that you have to carry and you feel unable to see light or hope, remember, there is always going to be hope. Somebody's there to listen. And Samaritans, and just to wrap that sort of around the Samaritans piece, Samaritans is there to provide that. We often get people saying nobody cares. And I don't believe that. I care. You care, Matt. There is always somebody that cares. So when people feel like there's nobody and I can't talk and there's nobody who's going to listen, that's not true. There is. What it is that's really important is you taking that first brave step to say it. And when you say it, people aren't going to judge you, they're going to listen. And I hope they're going to be able to help you.
That's the important thing. You might not think anybody out there cares, but there are individuals who do, and there are organisations that do, and they will talk and they will listen, more importantly. Matt, thank you very much. That's been brilliant. I will